Good evening, everybody. I am here. Hi, it's Zach Law, minus Sharona. She is under the weather, so I'm going to go it solo just a little bit. Going to be bringing on Karl Safchick of Dynasty League Football shortly to talk about Tennessee and Washington coming up this weekend. Winning streak? Well, that does sound strange to me. The Titans are no longer terrible. A victory feels good, but there's still a team that's refusing to firm up. The good news about Titans fans is we're not going to jump through the roof of the victory. I was in the stands last Sunday, and there's a look of really, really, when the Jaguars almost came back to beat the Titans. It would have been amazing had the Titans blown a 25-point lead at home one week and blown a 9-point lead in the final 37 seconds the following week. Thanks to Sammy Lee Hill's 4-inch vertical and a conservative Gus Bradley game plan, there was a win. So let's talk about the game. I was at the stadium along with not a lot of other Titans fans, and it probably was the smallest crowd of opposing fans I'd ever seen. Usually the section I'm in, the end zone, is full of fans of the other team, and that was the case for Dallas, but not for the Jaguars. I only saw, I don't know, a couple dozen Jaguars fans. They started getting testy at the end. But one thing about the stadium, I didn't really get a good look around at the first game, and I was able to purchase a Blackstone Nut Brown Ale, which is one of the local beers I like a lot. Of course, it was $9 cash for a 16-ounce beer, so, you know. But then again, you go to a bar, you spend $6 or $7 on a beer, so what are you going to do? Good thing is they only took cash, so I only could buy one. Otherwise, I would have been broke watching that kind of second-rate football. Both the Titans and the Jaguars played extraordinarily conservative. Jaguars threw, I'd say, I felt like 50% runs or screen passes to keep the play easy for Blake Bortles, who actually had a 300-yard game. Things to say about the game. Excuse me. Still dealing with the cough. So Jarrell Casey's still the man. 2 sacks in the game. I think he had 9 tackles. Was named Defensive Player of the Week. First player in the franchise to be named that in a long time. Good to see he's not calming down after getting the big contract. Bleedy Ray showed up. Ray Wilson showed up, had an interception. We will say that the Jaguars defender did slip. There were a few slips in the game. He got the interception, then he slipped when Clay Harbor went for the tackle. I think he might have been able to go for the 6, but we'll take that. It's nice to see a player come back from injury and some struggles and actually have a pretty good game. And the Jaguars did have all of their receivers that they wanted back in this game. They've had a bunch of injuries so far this year, so they were fully loaded and ready to go. As fully loaded as the Jaguars can get because they're kind of a little bit light on talent. So this was the game to say hello to the Titans 2014 draft class. First-round pick Taylor Lewan got his start at left tackle. We wondered if he'd get some playing time, and thanks to Michael Rue's season-ending knee surgery, he started at left tackle, had a good game. Sankey did the stanky leg thing a bit too often, and I'm telling you, every time he carried the ball, it's like he was thinking on the field. He was doing his little chop steps. He had one run where he got kind of free, and I think that's a run that Chris Johnson would have scored on, but he got caught after about 22 yards. Still kind of right. The top rusher, single rush of the season for the team. But he did have a season high 19 touches, almost 70 yards. Of course, the one play that the fantasy owners will remember is Titans got the ball at the 1-yard line and unveiled an unusual play. They put Chris Spencer in as an extra guard, as like an extra offensive lineman a lot. So they ran a play where basically defensive lineman Carl Klug was the fullback, and fullback, rarely used fullback, Jackie Battle came in, and he had the touchdown. And on a 4th and goal, or 4th and 1 at the 2 later in the game, they had that same lineup, but then they ended up kicking the field goal because it was the Wuskator coaching game of my life. So, yeah, Sankey played a lot. 5th rounder Avery Williamson started at inside linebacker, and he had a fumble recovery and a nice return. And Marcus Huff, who was that 4th rounder they got with the extra pick in the trade down to get Sankey. He played a lot. They like to put in a lot of safeties. So with Bernard Pollard out, it was Wilson. It was Wilson, Michael Griffin, Damian Stafford played some, and Huff played a lot too. He did let one punt get past him where he could have caught it with the one. But to have that much, like 4 rookies play a lot was really good. I'm not sure where that third rounder out of Penn State is, but he's not living up to the hype just yet. But hey, he's a rookie. So Charlie Whitehurst did pretty fine in a caretaker role. He was basically taking what the team would get him. They moved the ball pretty well, but they would die. I mean, they had 2 really short field goals in the game, and they needed all those points in the end to take the 2-score lead. It did seem like they had the game in hand, but he had the feeling that the Jaguars were going to get a shot. And one reason why is because in the fourth quarter, the Titans had the ball 3 times. They went 3 and out each time. And every time they had the ball, first down, they'd run the ball, and the guy'd get tackled for a 2-yard loss. The offensive line, there's a lot of talk about the Browns' offensive line. There's a lot of talk about the Cowboys' offensive line. The Titans have invested as much, if not more than those teams in their offensive line. It just hasn't quite come together yet. So we'll see. You got a couple first-rounders in there. Basically 3 out of the 5 guys with less than 2 years experience, so they still need some time to put it together. Justin Hunter had his weekly long catch, didn't score. He had a play on 3rd and goal where he was lined up on the slot, couldn't beat the press. That was Charlie Whitehurst's first read, and perhaps only read, because he pretty much had to go down on that play. The defense basically bent but did not break. They gave up a lot of yards, especially in the second half, but they got a couple of big turnovers whenever the Jaguars were getting close. And the offense definitely struggled. Now, another player who I've been talking smack about all year, Dexter McCluster, did well. Oh, my, and it looks like we have a visitor from the D.C. land.
How you doing, Zach?
Karl Safchick in the house. How are you doing? Doing well, doing well.
Good, good. Great to talk to you finally. Yeah, I see you're drinking as well. I'll play catch up with you. I'm very hungry for a beer.
Hungry for a beer. Or thirsty, either way. Yeah, I got let's see, Terrapin, Pumpkin Fest, and then I have a Boulder Shake for the follow-up, because, you always have that for backup beer.
Absolutely. I'm going with the 21st Amendment Brew Free or Die IPA in the can.
21st. I've had that on tap and really liked it. For some reason, the canned beer always tastes like can to me, but yeah, they do good stuff there in California.
Really? So you don't like canned beer at all, huh?
I don't know. I mean, it could be a mental block, but it always ends up tasting like the can.
Have you had IPA in a can?
I'm not really an IPA guy either. I mean, it's an odd thing.
Well, it was nice talking to you, Zach.
I know. This is really good radio. Let's just disagree about everything and just talk for 2 seconds. We'll get into that in a minute. But let's do a little introduction here. So Karl Safchick is an award-winning raconteur and one of the co-hosts of the Dynasty League Football podcast. He likes to hang out in bars and talk to strangers about football, and he roots for the Washington football team. So let's give a warm round of virtual applause to Karl.
Yay.
And before we get into questions, I had to look up, the last time these teams played. It was 2010. I was in the stands, and this was Vince Young's final start and final play for the Titans. And the Titans had an early punt return, and they basically decided to take it easy, mainly because they got rid of Vince Young, and then it was Rusty Smith playing. And it was the mighty Donovan McNabb. I don't remember if this was before or after he signed that crazy contract that was pretty much a paper contract. But the Washington team came back to win in overtime. The leading running back for Washington that day, Keelan Williams. I'm sure you have a jersey in the closet somewhere. And the leading receiver, Santana Moss. McNabb threw for 376 yards, and they won 19-16. So we get to play every 4 years. And who else was on the Titans that year? Randy Moss. Woohoo! I think that might have, I'm not totally sure, but Rusty Smith threw it past him for a touchdown. It was called back for offensive pass interference. That was the only time Randy Moss crossed the goal line for the Titans.
Was that the Albert Hainsworth revenge game?
Might have been. I don't know. Is he still cashing checks for them, or I'm not sure.
Oh, probably. I think the Maryland, D.C., Virginia taxpayer is going to be out of their pockets for a while on that one.
It seemed like for a while Washington would always sign the free agents to this giant contract, but it would just be, let's make the agent look good, and it says $100 million, but it's really like $4 million guaranteed. Like the Donovan McNabb deal was pretty much avoidable, I think, after 1 year, and then I think didn't they trade him? I mean, they got something for him.
Yes, I believe a future sixth from Minnesota.
Oh, gosh. Poor guy having to bounce around at the end.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a poor guy. He's got a little bit of money, and he doesn't have my sympathy either. But no, unfortunately the Albert Hainsworth contract was not a paper contract. That was $42 million guaranteed, I believe. 46, something crazy. And luckily they ended up getting out of it, but and then the rest of the NFL and specifically the Giants owner colluded against the Redskins to fine them a total of $32 million, I believe it was, over 2 years, and also fined the Cowboys $10 million over 2 years, I believe.
That probably didn't help much, that and not having any draft picks for the last 3 years.
Yeah, those two things added up were not fun.
Huh. So you have no draft picks and you don't have any money for free agents. So why's your team bad again? And you gave D'Angelo Hall a bunch of money again because that was fun.
No, his contract was tiny, comparatively. Not tiny for you or I, but tiny in the terms of
we take
football. Yeah, I will take D'Angelo Hall money any day. That's basically Oprah money to me.
So what is up with this Washington team? What's happening with them now? They seem a little slightly disarrayed at the moment.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint one thing. Losing your starting quarterback doesn't help. A lot of Kirk Cousins truthers out there, wanted him to be the guy. The fact is, and I've said it for the past few years, the fact is, whatever you think about RG3, and personally, my opinion of him as a football player is not extremely high, but whatever you think about him, Kirk Cousins is still worse. And that's what I think probably more Redskins fans had a problem with understanding, probably more than the rest of the nation, because as you know, there in Tennessee and a lot of fans out there know, the most popular guy on the team is the backup quarterback.
I don't know if Charlie White's is that popular. Maybe his beard is popular. Although I'm pretty sure that we sat next to his mom at the game because there was an older woman who sat down close to us who had a Whitehurst jersey. Trust me, not a lot of people have those. She had number 12 earrings, and she had a button on her front that had his picture, and usually that's something you have in high school. So I think he was nearby. But after that...
Hopefully he got that luxurious beard from his father and not her. That's not why you thought it was his mom, correct?
It is it is kind of hilarious though that. So when RG3 was in and struggling a little bit in preseason and doesn't know how to slide, everybody's like, start Kirk Cousins, and then they were talking about starting his backup last week. I'm like, oh man, it never does end, does it?
Colt McCoy, yeah. That is hilarious. That's just how it is in the NFL, though. And with RG3 being hurt, and hey, he might have had the same exact record as Kirk Cousins. Honestly, Kirk Cousins has stepped in and played fine, and I mean fine as in not horrible for a backup quarterback. For somebody who was never really going to be a franchise quarterback in this league, he's played admirably, but not enough to change the outcome of games. When he falls behind, he starts getting excited and wants to come back all in one play. I think that was his words himself, was that he wanted to change the game on one play. And at the quarterback position, you just cannot do that. You have to play within the system, and we know Jay Gruden to be a capable offensive mind, and Kirk Cousins just wanted to. He made basically what amounts to rookie mistakes and just throwing errant passes.
Well, I think this is the case. I mean, the NFL is definitely all about the quarterback, and it's definitely, definitely all about the starting quarterback. So if RG3 gets all the reps during the offseason, it's his offense. And Kirk Cousins comes in, it doesn't matter if he gets all the practice reps 1 week, he's going to struggle. I mean, there was this very drunken woman next to me yelling, "Put Mettenberger in" all game, and I would not do the bad Southern accent. But every time Charlie Whitehurst threw a bad pass, which was fairly often, he was yelling about Mettenberger, and I'm like, I don't think Mettenberger has gotten like 5 practice reps all year, so he's probably not going to look very good. And, 6th-round rookie, I don't care who you are, you're not going to pull it off. I mean, sure, Brady was fine his second year, but he had an entire offseason, and maybe that'll help. But Kirk Cousins, he had that good first start, and everybody was loving him, especially in fantasy circles, and then he's kind of tailed off. But what's a guy to do?
He had a good game as well. Maybe you are referring to the Eagles game. He had the very good game against the Jaguars in which he came in after the first series, and then he still had a good game in Philly. It's really the defense probably let the Redskins down more than anything. But yeah, like I said, he's played average. There's not a lot to get upset with him for because we knew his ceiling wasn't very high. But there's nothing to get excited about either.
It was just an odd situation. Hasn't happened very often in the NFL that you draft a guy early and then you draft another guy a few rounds later. And it wasn't Washington with Heath Schuler and Gus Frerotte. Actually, Frerotte had a much better and definitely longer career. But to take a guy in the 1st and the 4th when they only had a few picks looked weird, but I still think he's a good backup. Maybe someone gives him a shot as a starter. I don't know. But so you still, because I know we did our interview while back, you're pretty high on RG3, especially in like a dynasty format. You kind of cooling off on that a little bit.
Was I at that point? I think I've been lower, not very low, but I think I've been lower than consensus on RG3. I was high on him at one point, and towards the end of last year, I can't remember when we did that interview. Was that before the end of last season, or?
I'll have to look at the exact date. It's been a while.
Yeah,
I'm getting old. I'm forgetting stuff.
But towards the end of last year. Yeah, towards the end of last season, I should say, is when I started to cool my jets on him. I don't think I ever really had him in my top 5 to begin with, but no, I think I've always been a little lower on him than the consensus.
It's pretty much once he had that knee injury, I think if someone had traded him like in the first half of his rookie year, they could have gotten an insane return on investment.
Absolutely.
Ever since that knee injury, it's been like, I mean, it did seem early drafts this year, he was going like as the number 6 quarterback, and I thought, I just didn't see how he could, you're drafting somebody for maybe what his ceiling is going to be, and it just didn't seem like he was going to put it together.
I don't want to criticize his ceiling because I think he probably has as high of a ceiling as anybody, but he surely has as little of a floor as anybody too. So he's just one of those high variance type guys. I probably would have always taken a Matt Ryan or a Russell Wilson over him, and maybe even a Matthew Stafford. So I think probably the highest I had RG3 was probably 7 or 8 overall for the quarterbacks.
We just had that tantalizing running ability. It's hard to pass up on. So what do you think of the Jay Gruden era, all of 6 weeks in?
Well, it's hard to tell so far. He seems like a fine coach. He seems, I don't have any quarrels with him with the media. He seems to be open to answering questions, which is better than what the Shanahans were. And he seems to have his offense together. It appears as always that there's a lack of talent on the team, which it's hard to judge a coach when you have that bad of talent. I mean, the offensive line isn't great. You have a turnstile on the right tackle. The secondary isn't great. Even as much crap as D'Angelo Hall catches, he was the best corner on the team, kind of undoubtedly. So there's a couple rookie guys there now. Bashar Breeland who went to the same school as Hair Jesus, the backup for the Titans, Charlie
Clemson.
Whitehurst. Yeah, both Tigers, where I used to live, and yeah, Bashar Breeland and then David Amerson on the other side, who's a second year guy. Both young, both have a lot of upside, but right now they're just quarterbacks, including Carson Palmer, are just taking advantage of them.
Yeah, it had to be disappointing. Oh, this guy who couldn't feel his arm 2 weeks ago just beat us. But Carson Palmer's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I was hoping to get to see some Logan Thomas.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I think that's everybody's picking up Washington D, going, "Oh, Logan Thomas, come on!" And yeah, it was not good. So I think there's hope for the defense then.
Well, there's some good young guys. Ryan Kerrigan is one of the best outside linebackers in the league, whatever you want to call him, but best defensive players in the league. He really is, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves because he's on a bad team. He's one of those does everything really well type guys. He's not the greatest pass rusher, but he's really good at it. He's not the greatest in coverage, but he's really good at it. He's stout against the run. He's smart. He can make big plays. We've seen him run a couple interceptions back for touchdowns over the years. So, that's a nice core piece to build around. But there's nobody really. We have Jason Hatcher, who's up there in age, but is a very nice player. We have Brian Arakpo, who probably will not be back next year. Perry Riley is not great at football. And then we have a really bad secondary. Hopefully we get something better at those two corner positions. But so the defense is not great. I mean, there's pieces to build around. The offense is ready to be very good. And have been. I think last year they finished like 9th in total yards. So a lot of people were down on the offense going into this year, which I never really understood because they were never really the problem. I think on that side of the ball it comes down to health, and I think it comes down to getting one more really good tackle and putting him at right tackle because Tyler Columbus doesn't really deserve to be starting in this league. Really, outside of that, on offense, they have great players. They have Alfred Morris, who I'm very, very high on. I think he's one of the 5 best young running backs in the league. If a coach wants to commit to him and his style of running, and that's the zone scheme with a lead blocker with a fullback in front. And then Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garcon, Jordan Reed, one of the best pass-catching trios, and if you want to throw Andre Roberts in there, they're very good. So they have pieces to build around. It's just whether or not they can finally start putting the money towards it, and whether or not they do smart things with their draft picks, which hasn't been the case over the past 10+ years.
Yeah, I think wasn't Washington the team that had like the fewest draft picks? Like they had always traded them away.
Oh yeah, well that's Vinny.
Even over the decades.
Yeah, that's Vinny Serrato for you. He's the worst general manager in history. I mean, he never had the title of general manager, but he was effectively that. He signed Hainsworth to that huge contract. He was responsible for the big Brandon Lloyd, Antoine Randall, Adam Archuleta, that free agent class that just bombed. And even further back, he pulled together the Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith, that over the hill gang that didn't produce, and then went and traded a second-round pick for Jason Taylor. He played 1 year.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, maybe that was similar to talking to like a Cowboys fan. Like you had this history with the franchise that they won 3 Super Bowls and they won with 3 different quarterbacks and they're really good in the 80s and 90s. And now they've been kind of mediocre for, 15 so years.
Yeah.
Maybe that contributes to everything happening off the field. So what are your thoughts about the team name and the kind of, I feel like it's a simmering controversy and about being a fan of a franchise for a long time and getting this kind of, attack in the media that I don't think most fans of a football team are really used to seeing.
Yeah, it's a very unique situation. It's almost turned Redskins fans into being viewed as this sect of of racists or something like that. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Where our city, Washington D.C., is one of the most, if not the most, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but a very, very diverse city, with a lot of, African Americans, Caucasian, Indian, Native American. So many different people around here, and it just couldn't be any further from the truth. And actually, and I think I'm well on record that I don't think that the name should be, that anybody should be forced to change the name. I was actually ironically at the bar with a guy last night, a guy that I didn't go. I met him there though, and he happened to be Native American. And I asked him what he thought about the name, and he said, "Oh, well, I happen to be a Redskins fan." He says, "I actually think it's funny that so many white people feel as guilty as they do, that they think that they need to defend us." And what I've found over talking to a lot of Native Americans, there's another one in my family, and my father is also part Native American, and what I found is a lot of apathy towards the situation. They don't care. They think it's kind of silly, and if people who have the right to be offended are apathetic to the situation, then people that have no business being offended, I think, is a little silly.
I don't know if I'm totally there in that. I mean, I do get, like, one of the common comments about this whole situation is, well, there are other things you can get upset about, and that is true with the world in general. But at the same time, it's such a weird situation that we have this group of people who basically were almost pretty much wiped out, and then kind of using them for football purposes.
Well, you
Or,
do realize it was a Native American that came up with the name, correct? So I don't think that we
was that an actual? I don't know.
used them.
Problem is that the actual like background. I have a lot of the detail on that, but it does seem like it's like, do we really need to do this? I don't know. All these college teams having to change their nicknames to something generic, and of course you have the Florida State where you have an actual like tribe, but they're really just cha-ching here in the cash register's ring. So they're like, we're cool with this because this very small group of people are making a lot of money off of it.
Right.
But it's a little different in the NFL. And just, I don't know, the general dislike of Dan Snyder doesn't seem to help the situation very much.
Hey, I have to agree with you on that, and I think that I think that's a huge factor, and I think that that's an absolutely great point. And I think that what most people outside of the DC area don't realize is we hate Dan Snyder just as much as you guys do, and probably
I don't doubt that.
And probably even more so. And I put on Twitter last week, I said, hating Dan Snyder because you think he's a racist is like hating Hitler because you think he had a silly mustache. Dan Snyder is a terrible, terrible person, and there's plenty of facts to back that up. I mean, he's put people out of house and home because he wanted a better view from his house. There's so many situations where this is a really, really bad guy, and if you want to impeach him, whatever the equivalent is, then I'm all for it. If you want to create a mutiny on Dan Snyder, but one thing that I can never think that he is racist. So it's funny that so many people hate him for a reason that I don't think there's any proof that he is that.
Yeah, it's almost like he's kind of trying too hard to overcompensate. Like, he invited, was it the president of the Navajo Nation, I think, to the game, and they found out, oh, he actually was voted out, and he was found embezzling funds, and it's like, oh, really? Even when he makes a move to try to do something that looks good on the surface, it doesn't work out. But yeah, it seemed like Dan Snyder like sold his company at the height of the .com bubble, and basically sold a company that wasn't worth anything, and then bought Washington. And yeah, when you have a bad quarterback, you're in a bad situation for a few years, but you have an owner that thinks he knows stuff that he doesn't. Maybe Jerry Jones fits in there too. you're kind of stuck for a long time because those guys don't exactly, pass the reins on.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
is he involved in like decisions with like picking players up in free agency and stuff?
That's the big controversy. He's said from the beginning that he wasn't, but then every year he'll sneak a comment in that where he says something along the lines of "I'm going to be less involved this year," and we always go back to, well, you said last year you weren't involved. So yes, I think so. There was always the rumors that he was really good friends with Clinton Portis. Now it's out there that he's very good friends with Robert Griffin, and I just don't know that that's an appropriate relationship. At least in a football sense, if you want to be friends with them after their career is over, that's great. I know for a fact Jerry Jones has stayed close with a lot of his ex-players, but I think when you have an open door policy where the players can come to your office, the star players at that can come into your office and complain. I think that it's a very bad football relationship because you can supersede what the coach, the authority that the coach has. It's just a weird situation. Yeah, that's another reason that I don't like him.
Well, I think in Atlanta, because I'm in Atlanta, when Arthur Blank pushed Mike Vick on the wheelchair when he tore his ACL, that was like, oh yeah, and then years later you get to look at that, go, oh look at him, yeah. So yeah, we're in a weird situation with the Titans because the owner died, and now we have a son-in-law who didn't really want to be involved, who's sort of running the team, but he's out of Houston, so it's like, how many billionaires do we have out there? And it seems like a lot of them just happen to be assholes. So I don't know if that's gonna work out.
Well,
You
hey,
got
maybe
the
it's even better to addition by subtraction. To have them not involved would be even better. I'd trade you situations right now.
I mean, like with the Patriots, like Robert Kraft isn't calling Belichick and go, hey man, I saw this linebacker, you should pick him up. So he's just like, yeah, you got it, you're good.
Yeah, and the Rooneys. I mean, you could go up and down the list. The successful franchises know the owners know their role, and unfortunately here in DC, um, our owner does not. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about your Titans. What do you think? That I kind of took over an unofficial Titan fanhood before the year started
You poor
just
dear.
because I think it was more ironic than anything that I just so happened to be high on these players. I really liked Kendall Wright, at least compared to the consensus in Dynasty, and obviously I think you've probably seen more than anyone me talk about Justin Hunter. I really love that kid. I think he can. I don't think he's there yet, and I don't think there's any argument around that. But I think he can blossom into a great receiver in this league.
Oh, there's so much hope, but there's just the slight problem, which is the quarterback position at the moment, and it's painful because we had this. You had Steve McNair, which was a pretty good era, and then they had Kerry Collins, Vince Young, Carnival of Horrors for like 5 years. And they drafted Jake Locker, and he's definitely the off the field guy they wanted Vince Young to be, but on the field he's just inconsistent, and then he gets hurt every week, and it's a different thing. And Charlie Whitehurst isn't the answer, and I don't think Mettenberger's the answer. All these fans get excited about a guy who throws decent in the preseason. Hello, Kirk Cousins, It's like, oh, you're going to be the man. It's like, yeah, you're throwing against third stringers. You should look good if you're an NFL player. Maybe he's better than Rusty Smith. Oh, my gosh, it's horrible. Trusty Rusty. How that guy made it 4 years in the NFL is beyond me, but it was a fun ride. And that's the trouble is, so they got the new head coach. They got the new entire coaching staff. Mike Munchak, it was like a gift from Bud Adams to give him that head coaching job. So we have this bumbling head coach who doesn't quite know what he's doing. Now we have a professional head coach. That should make a difference. And the team looks just as discombobulated as they did the last couple of years. And the coaching staff going out in public and saying, "Hey, we didn't think we're this bad." It's just not. I'm not getting the warm fuzzies from them. He sounds like a guy who's not prepared, but it seems like Wizen Hunt. If he has the Kurt Warner, he's fine, but he doesn't have the Kurt Warner. So Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that may be the
painful.
problem with a lot of coaches though. And hey, I don't know what it's like at all to have a coach that was in over his head who was given a job. Jim Zorn, I won't mention any names, Jim Zorn.
Yeah, it's been a. I don't know. I feel like I can relate more to fans who are a little more downtrodden for some reason.
Right,
The Patriots guys were like Rumford Johnny. They had like 2 bad weeks. I'm out on this team. Yeah, shut up, man. You've been in the playoffs like 15 years in a row.
right.
I can never even imagine. Although, I mean, I have a friend who's a Patriots fan. I remember before the Belichick era, they were not good. So we all know. But this is kind of weird because I've done 140 or so interviews. You're one of the few, haven't been roped in yet. So are you still the most eligible fantasy football bachelor?
Oh, absolutely. And I know that you probably have like a lot of women that listen to this, and they just love men who want to talk about fantasy football. So yeah, send them my way.
That's the one.
It's such a glamorous position, and I just have women just hitting me up on Twitter just all day, every day, just wanting to go on dates, and they just can't believe that my opinions on certain fantasy guys. So yeah.
Yeah, tell me about your flex position. Well, it is funny because I met Justin Bonham, who writes for Football Guys, on week one or week two, the Cowboys game.
I
I
think
met
I
him
saw those
again.
pictures.
I met him again last weekend, and he got married, and I got to meet his wife. And I'm like, so what do you think about football? She's like, I don't care. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you compartmentalize. Okay.
Right.
He watches football. I do my thing. It's fine. So it's all good. So I don't know what to say. Hmm.
That's a fine relationship to have, though. I wouldn't need. How does you're married, correct?
Yeah, my wife, I think she went to grad school because of football, because she's like, I'm gonna have something to do during the football season.
So
So
she. Oh, okay. So she does not enjoy football either, then.
no, one of our classic moments, and I think we were still dating, was the Titans were playing the Steelers in the playoff game. She got us tickets in the end zone, watched me argue with a dude over Eddie George fumbling because he freaking passed out, got concussion, and then she got bronchitis at that game, and I think she's been to like 2 games since. She's like, she came to Nashville last weekend. My parents were like, you coming to the game? She's like, yeah, no, no. So not so much of a fan of me, but not the football. So we'll take that.
That's good enough. That's all you need, though. And if I feel like a lot of guys' wives that I know in the fantasy industry are not really into football, and that's totally fine. If they were, then what break would you really have from football?
Why would you need a break? I don't understand. What's the deal? So let's talk about your writing life and your podcast life. So what's happening at Dynasty League football? Have you guys officially absorbed another 50 writers since last we checked in? And how's the podcast going?
Oh, the podcast is going good. It's actually probably just starting recording right now. We actually brought back Tim Stafford, who hasn't done an episode in a long time. As many know, Jarrett Behar and I, and Eric Carter, and now every now and then Tim Stafford. He used to be full time, but between the three of us and Tim, we've had some great guests on lately. We had Matt Waldman, we've had Matt Williamson, we have Evan Silva on all the time. It's a really, really fun conversation, and I try to keep it fun and funny and entertaining as much as it is informative, which our guests are always willing and able to provide great information. I mean, some of these guys, we've had Nathan Zagura, who's the head of media relations in Cleveland. We had Scott Kaxmer from Football Outsiders. I mean, we just have these great guests on all the time. I think next week we're having Jake Seeley, All-In Kid, on to talk about relationships between fantasy and poker. It's just a fun. I try to keep it fun, try to keep it informative. And if you play Dynasty football, we're talking about players all the time. Last week, Jarrett and I got into a mini argument about Calvin Johnson and what his value should be. And, it's just a really good time. We put a lot of effort and time into. We got all new equipment, and we're doing the Google Hangouts thing now instead of the Blog Talk Radio, which is a huge upgrade. So, yeah, man, I definitely advise everybody to check it out.
And we get to see your pretty faces now, so that's cool.
Well, we only record the audio. If you ever want to jump on and watch us, you can. But we record it just as a podcast. But it's just like me and you are talking right now. And if I'm talking and you want to jump in, you could say, "Hey, I want to say something," which you can't do on the phone. And there's that dreaded 4-second delay when you're on Blog Talk Radio. I don't know if you've ever been on it, but now we're away from that.
Yeah, there's some over talking on the last one I did. It's like you wait. Of course, I had that issue last week. I did a hangout. Brad Hill talks about the Jags, and it seemed like there was a 2 or 3 second delay because he was doing it on his phone. So yeah, technology's still getting there, but it's cool. I mean, I did the Faked Goods podcast. That was we did the hangout, but it was audio for the actual podcast itself.
And those guys are just awesome, aren't they? They're just a load of fun. We actually had Chad on. We've had both of them. We had Rich on a couple months ago, and then we had Chad on a few weeks ago. And Chad is just, if I only had one word to describe him, it is fun.
Yeah, Chad has a good time, and I think he's like me. He works through a few beers for each episode as well, so that's nice. Because he's like, all right, I'm going to sit here and let Rich talk for 30 seconds or for 5 minutes about, stats about the 49ers from 1992. And I'm going to have a shotgun a beer while he does it.
Right. We had him on, and I don't even remember what the exact subject was, but Jarrett kind of got in depth on his opinion, and I said, oh, well, this is how I evaluate players. And Chad says, I just get drunk, and I just trust my gut.
Yeah, that sounds like him. Yeah, he's in our. I got him in a Zealots Dynasty League, and he just made a blockbuster trade with our guy from England. He got Russell Wilson, so I think he's very happy about that part.
Oh, yes, he wrote a great.
I'm trying to remember. It was Russell Wilson, Allen Robinson, and one more guy for Alshon Jeffrey, because Ben, the British guy, is trying to dominate the wide receiver position. So,
which is not a bad market to cover.
Yeah, I'm just learning that this year because, this is something about Dynasty. Your head and your heart, or your head versus your emotions. So during this off season, I figured that Matt Forte was getting toward the end of his career, so let me trade him while his value's high. So I traded him to my dad for a draft pick that became Mike Evans. And so with Forte having this great year, my dad team being undefeated, I'm like, but I have Mike Evans and I could have him for 12 years. That's good. But for this year, it's not going to, it might not look like I won the trade. So I'd be like, yeah, you just have to bite your tongue and wait.
And that's what's beautiful about Dynasty. There's so many different ways you can go about building your team. And if you don't think you're good right now, you can build for the future. And if you think you're good right now but one piece away, you can mortgage your future. It's a very, very fun and unique way to play fantasy football. And now we're kind of at the point in the fantasy world that you could play it any way. You could play Dynasty, which could go 10, 20 years. You could play Redraft, which just goes over the season. And now we have Daily, which you just play just based on that 1 week. So I almost compare Dynasty, which is ironic since I'm, as you mentioned, one of the only non-married guys that you've spoken to. But I almost compare Dynasty to marrying your team rather than dating your team.
Yeah, you get to be with players for a long time. I just this year cut the last player I had from my initial draft in 2006, and it was Charles Tillman. Charles Tillman and Rob Baronis were on my team that first year, and it's pretty bad when you have a player in your team that has died. That means you've been in fantasy for a while.
Yeah.
Another fun Titan situation off the field. That wasn't so good.
I had Santana Moss on one Dynasty team for, I want to say, 10 years, 11 years? 2000, okay, maybe 9 years, but still very, very long time. In one league, I had Matt Ryan for his entire career since he's been in the league. I could probably go on with a couple other different players. I'm trying to remember some of my longer contracts, but that's what makes it fun. Is if you almost get an emotion to these guys, and for a lot of people that play redraft, they get emotionally connected with some of these players that they can only not have the next year. So in Dynasty, you say you picked up Le'Veon Bell this year, but at the end of the year, you're stuck not having Le'Veon Bell, and if you want him again next year, you're going to have to spend a very high pick on him. In Dynasty, you select him relatively low this coming year, I guess, and at least compared to what his price will be the next year, and you get to have him for his entire career.
Well, I think I had the term dynasty immortality, and so I got, Matt Forte, I think, was the 5th pick in the 2008 rookie draft. Well, I was able to trade the 5th pick in the 2008 rookie draft for the 2nd pick in this year's draft, and maybe 7 years from now I'll trade that pick for another pick and just keep going. And you get to keep those picks kind of in perpetuity. So yeah, we like the dynasty, even though, well, I'm just in one league, so I'm not like a pro or anything. But so final thoughts on the game this weekend. How do you think it's going to go, and what are you going to be drinking? And are you going to be in some bar during the game for the Titans and Washington?
It's hard for me to predict this game because we're both
special guest star.
That's what it is. I'm going to start sneezing already.
Yeah.
I'm highly allergic. I can't even look at pictures. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think that both teams are not great, so it's hard to determine who's going to win. I guess I would give the advantage to the home team in this situation. But there's some players that I want to see, and that's more. I tell a lot of people, and a lot of people don't understand, is I will have a great time watching any NFL game. When I look at a quote-unquote bad team like the Titans, I am really excited to see Justin Hunter play. I like what Kendall Wright can do underneath as a possession receiver. If Jake Locker plays, hey, I mean, he's got one last chance to just even probably prove himself for a backup job. So, I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to see guys like Jarrell Casey, who is one of the best defensive linemen in the league, but a lot of people don't realize that. And then for the Redskins, who I get to see all the time, but I want to see Alfred Morris play. I want to see some of these other defensive guys around Ryan Kerrigan play well. So in any game, I can find interesting players to watch. So really, one player who I'm tied to the most in this game is Justin Hunter. So I'd really like to see him have a big game while maybe somehow still being a loss.
Well, he did have that 75-yard catch against the Browns, and they still lost.
He's good for a 175-yarder per game, right?
Well, I feel like between him against Washington's inexperienced secondary and then Deshaun Jackson getting behind anybody in the NFL, yeah, we could see a couple of those, because you can say what you want about Kirk Cousins lately. He's still finding them deep occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's do you have a game day beer of choice, or are you just like, hey, whatever's on there?
I'll tell you what I do. Usually if it's a day game, coincidentally enough, I do not drink during the day. But I will usually go to the bar for the 8:30 game, and I will have a draft loose cannon that's out of Baltimore. It's a Heavy Seas brewery beer, and loose cannon is the IPA, and I'll get a 22 ounce, and I'll sit there and watch the first half of the night game.
Aha! So you keep it going. I don't know, what is the night game this week? I don't even remember.
I haven't looked either, but yeah, I'm a strictly IPA guy. I'll have loose cannon. I'll have Dale's Pale Ale in a can. I love that. I'll have
there's a lot of love for that one. I had one that was like an English Pale Ale when I was in Tennessee, and it had like this kind of malty flavor, so the bitterness didn't kick my butt that much. The bitterness doesn't doesn't work. If I'm gonna have bitterness, I just go to town, like Sierra Nevada torpedo that just like blows your face off with bitterness. I'll go that way occasionally, but usually I like my dark stuff, and of course my chocolate porter, shake chocolate porter from Boulder. It's very good. It's like a milkshake in a glass, and some people are like, chocolate and beer, come on, but man, it's my dessert.
I can't. I couldn't do it. How about any of the other local ones? Have you had Dogfish Head?
I've had some of it. There was one called San Marin or something. It was like a very heavy booze beer, but I've had some of theirs before. One thing I'm finding, because I was in Nashville, so my wife was in town for a book fair, and I was in town for a Titans game. So after the game, I met her at a bar she basically met with someone from high school, and her friend was like, oh, I write about beer and I write about bourbon. So she was telling me about all the Tennessee breweries. So I got to have a couple of local beers before I drove back to Nashville. And they have some good stuff. It's like any town you go to now, they have, it seems like 20 interesting breweries. So you just can find all these cool beers wherever you go. And then all the microbreweries from around the country are shipping their stuff everywhere. So you can try beer from around the country. So it's always fun.
And that's great. I wish more people would at least explore their own palate and figure out what they like. People don't actually like Miller Lite and Bud Light and stuff like that. They don't. I tell people that they're like, no, I really like it, and there's no way you like that. That's a horrible. Those are horrible beers. But go out and explore and see what you like. I consider myself a bit of a beer connoisseur. I am probably a bit of a snob. I turn my nose up at some of the stouts and porters and stuff like that. But I will try almost any good ale, and I wish others would do the same.
There's just too much beer out there to not enjoy it. Well, Karl, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I won't say any more plugs, but you're all DLF all the time, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
A guy writes for one site. Wow. So we have this bachelor guy, living the bachelor life, yet he's monogamous in fantasy. That's crazy. But anyway, so thanks for coming to the show. I think we'll cut it off for now. We kind of did our going for one since Sharona's under the weather. Did a little bit of Titans talk about last week's game, and I think the Know Your Enemy segment was a success. I think we are both winners, even if our teams are not. So thanks again, Karl, for coming on the show. And yeah, definitely happy drinking this weekend. And someone's going to be happy. And I think our fantasy teams are definitely going to be happy. So we got that going for us.
I don't think any of us are going to be happy as much as we're going to be less sad.
There you go. So we'll just say good night, everybody, and